Welcome to People Unplugged, the podcast from the creative team at People Unboxed. I'm Westy, Digital Director at People Unboxed. This is the People Unplugged podcast. Okay, good afternoon everyone, buckle up. This month we're diving into some fascinating territory with Judith Germain, the brilliant mind behind the Maverick paradox. Now, if you haven't read Judith's book, you're in for an absolute treat. We're going to do a deep dive into it today, and I've got a ton of questions which, after having a good look through the book, hopefully Judith's here to help me with. And it's fair to say she's about shaking things up, showing us how to spot and really make the most of those people that, I guess in some ways just see things differently. You know, the ones who challenge the norm and push us outside the box. So if you're looking to foster innovation, drive change, hopefully this show is right up your street. So Judith, I know you're here to sort of help us figure out how to build a space where these, I think you call them strategic mavericks, can really shine. So firstly, let's get into that. So pleased to have you here. Firstly, how was that for an intro?
It's a great intro. I just want to clarify that the book title is The Maverick Paradox: The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders.
Let's get into who you are, why you're here, how you've got to what you do, and all of that nice stuff. So very, very potted history of Judith, if you wouldn't mind.
Gosh, I wasn't quite expecting that. So,
no, I'm sure.
I guess round 2005. So I'm ex-head of HR, and HR was my second industry. I was a commercial underwriter before that. So I moved straight into HR from that. And it's a funny story in a way, because I got a bit disillusioned in the insurance industry. I felt that I could do HR. So I wrote to a top retailer saying, "You're great because, I'm great because, can I have a job please?" I was 24. And it's pretty much was that. And about 2 months later, they phoned me up and said, "Oh yeah, come for an assessment centre." And I said, "Oh, that's great." I put the phone down and I thought, "What's the job?" So I phoned them back and said, "Oh," and I tried to find a way of saying, like, I don't know what the job's for. I said, "Oh, I'm just curious of the exact job title." And they're like, "Nice. Head of HR." And I was like, of course. And at that point, I wasn't qualified. I had never worked in HR before. And I remember going back to the people on my course, the IPD course, and saying, "What do HR managers do?"
What is it I'm supposed to be good at? Yeah, love that.
I've got this assessment, so I don't know what you do. So I went into, obviously got the job, so I went into HR, and in about 2005, I decided that I really enjoyed the people, working with the people that no one else could work with, the really intelligent people that were quite disruptive. Okay. And I was quite a disruptor, as you can imagine, myself. So I left. So I left corporate life to work with these individuals, and I later sort of like defined the term maverick to me, because being a maverick, I didn't like the definition of a maverick, so I changed it.
What was that definition in your mind back then? Was it someone who was disruptive and a bit of a pain?
Yeah, it was more that kind of Top Gun or Maverick, who were cheeky and disruptive because they wanted to. What I would say are more extreme mavericks. Yeah. And I think there was something missing there. And I think what's missing is that being a maverick is someone who's willfully independent. So I wanted to work with that. And over the years, it's gone from working with the willfully independent entrepreneur to the maverick leadership principles. And how does that work around culture, influence, and leadership?
Lovely. Love that. So you talk about strategic mavericks. So who are they? I mean, you talk a lot about different kinds of mavericks. Maybe you can break that down by what you mean by a strategic maverick. You've already said what a maverick isn't. And for those listening, why is it important to not just, I guess, identify those people as being mavericks, but actually help them flourish instead of... I guess we can accidentally sort of squash their unique brilliance if we don't. So who are those strategic mavericks in your mind? Okay,
so they're what would be called maybe the troublesome talent. So they're really, really good at what they do, but they cause trouble because they break the rules that need to be broken. They see something. I always, like in my book, I talked about them being the canaries, because they can see what's happening 3, 4, 5 months out. And when they start to articulate that, people think they're crazy because they can't see it. It's like people, like Mavericks were talking about COVID without knowing it was COVID. They were seeing the patterns and saying, there's something's happening in China. This is what's happening. We need to start. And people were like, I don't understand what you're talking about.
So did you see yourself like that in your HR world, or were you trying, or were you so, was everyone trying to stifle you so much that you couldn't be that maverick you wanted to be?
No, I was always able.
Love it.
But I thought I was weird, though. Do you know what I mean? I thought I was the only one like this, because I could see things really clearly. I would say what needed to be said, and I would stand up for what was right. And that was causing me a lot of problems in the role that I was in, because and I wasn't really held. I wasn't really kind of constrained into HR. So I used to say to people, right, I'm going to train a responsible adult to run HR, and I'm going to play with leadership team. And I used to even say that at interviews. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play with leadership team. HR will run, but this is what I'm going to do. So that's
you were looking for the designated adult, right?
I was like, right, they're good. Let's train them up. They can do HR. I'll do the strategy of HR, and I will help with it. So I was deputising for CEOs, ops directors, sitting in marketing, looking at campaigns. So I was more like an ops person. Yeah. In that respect, which is quite unusual, especially back then.
Yeah. So, is it fair to say that let's say at the top of the business, but what I mean is sort of leaders, whatever, in a lot of businesses, and through my experience of working with a number of different businesses, they all kind of aim for the same thing, which is all about consistency and conformity. And is it fair to say you're suggesting we embrace the opposite, right? So how can people do that? How can they intentionally create an environment where maverick thinking and innovative problem solving can sort of really flourish? So I guess we want groundbreaking ideas, but at the same time, people listening to this might go, yeah, but I can't have utter chaos and people doing what they want to do. So how do we balance that?
Well, you want constrained chaos, right? Not utter chaos.
Yeah.
And I think it's the culture. So you need to have a culture that doesn't blame. You need to have a culture that learns and seeks innovation. And you want to be able to have people that feel like they belong and they can stand up and do what's right. You know, it's all very well to have a value of transparency and honesty, but not if you kill people when they say something. So real mavericks, what I call in the book socialised mavericks, they will only break rules that need to be broken. They won't do it for the sake of causing problems. Right. So it's a case of, I'll give you an example. I remember being in a company being hired, and I was watching how HR runs, obviously. And then there was this one task that took like a whole week for 2 people to do. And so I was like, what is this thing that you're doing? And they produced this really detailed stuff for finance. And I said, what does finance do with it? And they go, we don't know, but we've done it for years. Anyway, so I go to finance and said, what do you do with this? And they said, we don't know, but HR gives it to us all the time and we just file it. And I said, so you do nothing with this? And they're like, we don't know why it's here. Yeah. So I was like, well, that needs to stop. You know,
and do you know what?
It kind of related to some old system or something, and that's
some legacy thing, and we've always done that. And you know, as you're describing that, and I mean, people listening to this obviously will know my background, and you probably don't. But I worked for McDonald's for 26 years, and 10 years of that in the corporate training department. And I remember one of the very first things I did when I was first in that department is you used to produce a report and I'd probably do it every Monday, Tuesday, whatever. So like a training report for everyone. You send it out and it go to all of the area managers and all of that nice stuff. It probably took me 2 hours a week to put all that together. Because a lot, you know, you're talking like, 96,000 people as it was there. But anyway, whatever. So you put all this together. And then unfortunately I had a car accident. And so I was off that Monday, so obviously it didn't go out and no one else did it. And I think I was 2 or 3 weeks off and came back. And I sent this email out and I said, I'm really sorry about the training report, but I'll be up to speed again next week. And no one responded. And I was like, what? And then I bumped into an area manager and actually said, oh, sorry about the training report. And he went, yeah, I'll be honest, I don't really look at that anymore. And I was like, what? Well, why didn't anyone say? And do you know what? His answer is absolutely clear. His answer was, well, I thought it must take you ages. I don't want to upset you. It's like, what? You don't want to tell me that I don't need to do it because you don't want to upset me because it takes me ages. It's exactly what you're saying. It's crazy. We add more and more things in, but rarely do we go back and challenge it and go, do we still need to do that? Do we still need that?
And you know why? I think So maverick leaders are execution driven, which is very different from implementation driven. So when people talk about things being implemented, what they mean is we have a strategic plan and we're going to implement that plan. So we're going to follow all the steps and we're going to get it implemented. Execution takes a step back. It doesn't start with a strategic plan. It starts with a strategic thought in the first place. And then before you run right through execution, you're doing a simulation where you're working through. It's like, if I execute this, will I have achieved what I meant to achieve?
Right.
And when you feel that you are likely to, that's when you execute. So an example would be, think about COVID, especially like in payroll. So you would say, we had to suddenly pay people on systems which don't handle remote. So people came in and they crashed it, didn't they? And everybody got paid, and everybody said, what a great thing. Everything was implemented. It was fantastic. Every single person got paid all over the country. But there were hundreds of payroll specialists burnt out, unable to work, the stress of it. So it wasn't executed well. It was implemented perfectly. Execution, very poor, because it had this huge knock-on effect. And maverick leaders will hold back the team and say, I don't think this is going to execute. It's not going to work. And the team's looking at it and going, it will, because it fits the plan.
Right.
But is the plan right?
Nice. Yeah, exactly that. So how do they do that? Is that just them saying, let's take a step back, let's look at it in a slightly different way?
That's part of it, but I think I would say maverick leaders' mantra is to test everything, trust nothing. And that doesn't mean that you're very critical. It's like, if someone says to you, this is the problem, you go, okay, and you interrogate that. And then you often will find that is not the problem, that's the symptom of the problem. So then you go back to where the problem is. So I say maverick leaders are actually starting at the right place. Yeah. So they'll ask a ton of questions, but the questions are diagnostic. They're not because they're challenging. It's like, I just want to understand. So they'll say, if I did this, how does that work? Who does it fit? So there's like loads of holistic questions, and you'll notice that maverick leaders don't stick in their silo because they're searching, and so they'll be asking questions on everybody's silos.
Right.
So they'll understand what the real problem, all the holistic stuff, and the contextualization of everything, and then they say, this is what you do. And during that point, before that point, maverick leaders have really strong engaged networks. They know how to get whatever they need to get, because they know, really, if you speak to this PA, they can get into that director's diary, or this person in payroll holds the rules. Don't go to the payroll manager, they don't know anything. This person knows everything. So when it comes to actually doing the execution, they've got this engaged network that they can pull on. They look at the holistic problem, they contextualize it, they understand the teams and the people, and they're not frightened to ask the questions that are uncomfortable if it drives to a solution, because they never take anything as stated. So it doesn't matter. So if you say this is the way it is, before they agree this is the problem, they will challenge it. And it can be uncomfortable if people don't understand it's just a process. It's not personal, it's just a process.
Yeah. So if I could pick up on that, just to make sure I've got it. So are you suggesting that there are these people and we need to understand them better and work with them because they bring X to the business? Or are you suggesting that actually people should be actively working towards being a maverick leader? And if I've got that wrong, then please, can you see the difference? It's like okay,
I would say that there are a small percentage of socialised mavericks in the workplace. However, everybody can be a maverick leader, because it's an adaptive framework based around principles. So one of my clients called it, she said, what's great about it is that it takes you from where you are and shows you how to flex. Yeah. So it's not like a leadership thing, like situational leadership saying, yes, if you follow this practice, because I think that in itself is manipulative. So leadership can be quite manipulative, because what it says is, if you follow this prescribed thing, you can get anyone to do anything. And that's ridiculous, because it doesn't even think about you as a person. So a maverick leader will not follow someone they don't respect or trust, right? So therefore you as an individual has an impact on the people you're leading, and how you lead is based somewhat on who you are. So Maverick leadership itself is an adaptive, contextualized system.
Right, so it's something that can be taught the same as lots of other sort of leadership techniques. Brilliant, cool. And does it? Do you think it's particularly suited to a certain? I don't want to go into the whole insights thing, but is it certain colour profiles? Is it a certain personality type? Is it, or can anybody do this?
Everybody. In fact, I would go further and say everybody needs to be a Maverick leader, and every organisation should empower people, because the difference is that person will sit there, whether they're the janitor or the CEO, and say, "This isn't working." They'll call out, "That's a naked emperor right there, no clothes on, completely naked. He's running around, no clothes on." They will say, and that's what you need. Yeah. And if you think about it, is that COVID showed this up in a very stark way, which is that you cannot rely on what you did in the past to get through to what you need to do stable in the future. Sure. What you need to be able to do is to understand the patterns of the past and to predict the future. And that's what Maverick leaders do. And you can learn how to do that. Because
COVID's odd, isn't it? Because the whole COVID situation has basically forced people's hand to do something, dare I say, out of their comfort zone. But do you know what I mean? We had to think differently. We had to look in it in a slightly different way. And you and I are never going to sit here and say, well, COVID's actually a very good thing. But I know when you and I actually met, we were at an awards event, weren't we? And we were talking about, Bento Bot. Yeah. And actually, as bizarre as this is going to sound, COVID was a really good thing for us, because you know what, people had to look at different ways of doing their learning. We couldn't go in a classroom anymore and deliver that. And so how are we going to do this? So sometimes those disruptors are forced upon us and we have to change. I wonder if we actually would have changed if we hadn't have had that. And I don't think we would have done it.
We would, but I think the difference is, if you go back to that time, Maverick leaders, apart from the first couple of weeks of shock like everybody else, went, right, okay, going to get on with it. And the reason why they were successful is because they'd already pre-thought of the possibility, not the possibility there was going to be a pandemic, but they were looking they could see the patterns. So all the COVID did was bring it forward faster. But it was already predictable that this was happening, just that other people hadn't seen it. So when it hit, it was like, you know what, I kind of know what I'm going to do, because I could see that training was going to go on virtually. You could see all that stuff starting to happen anyway.
A lot of what you're describing now, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and please do tell me if I got it wrong, but it sounds like what you're describing is people speaking up, people being confident enough to challenge. Is there something that needs to be in place culturally to support that? So we talk a lot about psychological safety, for example, and a lot of what you're describing to me there sounds like we're going down that line. Can we still have Maverick leaders within businesses where it is very regimented, it is no, this is the way we think? Or are they there anyway, they're just very frustrated?
I think that you will find the actual Mavericks by personality will stand in the fire anyway, because they're like, you know what, I'm just going to tell you as it is, and this is the way it is. And they'll get burnt, but they're fine with that. And I think that if you trained everyone to be a Maverick leader, the culture itself would change. But realistically, you have to start by trying to change the culture. And as you
How do we do that? How do you do that, Judith? What's the starting point?
Okay.
How long we got?
Brain out my head.
I feel like we're about page 10. We've got this whole book to go through.
Well, my view is that when you think about culture, you start off with the leader, the individual, right?
Yep.
So we have a culture of one. So my ethnicity, my value set, all those kind of things that relates to me is my own individual culture. Yep. Then I go into work and I meet other people, and then that forms a leadership collective culture.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yep.
And that's things where psychological safety fits, what tolerance is there to risk, those kind of things, yeah. And then you have the organisational culture, and that's the thing that supports what the leadership culture is doing. So how do we pay people? How do we sack people? What's the objectiveness? How we recruit? That's the culture. And finally...
Do they have to match? Do they have to match?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
No, cool. Yeah.
This is a trick question.
It's not a daft question.
And then, so the reality of the customer, whether it's internal or external, is what's really happening by the leadership collective culture. And the reason I kind of brought it out in a kind of long form way is that
cool.
people come in and go, I can change your culture, and they start with the organizational culture, right? So they'll say, oh, let's change the way that you do performance. Let's show what the visions and the values are and the rest of it.
Yep.
And then they walk away, right? And then they wonder why it hasn't changed. It's because the organizational culture is what's supporting the real culture, which is what the leadership collectively does. And that's where you start there, not on the organizational culture. And I think that's why a lot of culture fails, because, you know, you grab the organizational culture and say, this is what we need to do. It's like, but what are you really rewarding? What are you really rewarding? And you're rewarding whatever is being tolerated for the leadership collective. And that's where you start.
So do people need to take a step back? If they're already down that road and that's the way they're doing, can they pause that there and step back and go, hold on, we need to rethink this? Because it's not going to change, right?
Yeah, you can. Because if you think about it, what is culture? Culture is a load of behaviours. It's not just, people used to say, people still say, culture is what we do around here. I agree. But I also say, yes, and it's who we are around here. Who we are around here and what do we do around here. So if they've already gone down the path, they can start tackling who we are around here, who we are collectively around here, as well as who we are individually around here. And that's how you get behavioural change. Because you know, right, I can't change your attitude on anything. I can talk to you for ages and you're like, yeah,
you can try and influence, but you're right. I've got, and it's fair to say that's going to be based on previous experience, maybe my upbringing, and it does personal values and all of that good stuff. It's nothing to do with work, really. It's just that's the way I am. You're right. Yeah.
But I can change your behaviour.
Yeah.
And once I change your behaviour, you will be in cognitive dissonance, and you need to decide whether you're going to go with your new version of behaviour or your old version. So I'm about how do we change? What is it we want? Okay, what are the behaviours that are required to make that happen? And now let's change that behaviours. Because I do a lot of, culture change and change management stuff, and that's what I do. It's like, what is it that you want to achieve? And they'll tell you whatever it is, and then you say, well, how do they need to be then? Which is a harder question. So then I'll say, right, so it sounds to me that needs to be more accountable, needs to be more this. Yeah. Okay, let me design something that will get you an accountable person that can be trusted, can be more strategic, whatever it happens to be. And then I'll design the program for those unique behaviours and skills exchange that's needed to make that culture work. So it has to be individual.
That's fascinating. I absolutely love that. So, and you're absolutely right. From what I'm hearing is, I can imagine people bringing you in and saying, Judith, you need to help us agree what our values are because it's the culture and here's what we want. But that's almost secondary to, well, what about the people that are actually doing this stuff, right? I love that. I'm stumped because I'm thinking, the amount of companies I've worked in where we've actually worked that way round and haven't stopped and thought, yeah, but who's doing this? And how does that tie in with hiring people? How does that tie in with bringing in new people? Do you have to bring in people that have the right mindset in the first place, or does that just disrupt it more?
See, I'm one of those because I'm a bit weird, right? Because I'm a bit.
You're Maverick. You're not weird.
About culture fit. I kind of agree and kind of disagree. Because if you bring everybody else as exactly the same, then there's no ability, there's no redundancy in the system to change when needed, right? So if they're all the same, when COVID hits, you can't do nothing.
Yeah.
So if culture fit is around a set of defined values, that's okay. But if it's around a set of behaviours, that might not work. So here's an example. Think about the NHS. So back in the day, the government needed people to follow the strategy. So therefore, they had a lot of people who were great implementers, great working out the smaller strategy to get things done and to make sure it's right so people don't die. And then the government, certainly NHS England, changes to say, well, you need to come up with some ideas on your own. And you need to now coordinate across all the different NHS, different parts of the business organisation. But you've got a lot of people who are there like following orders. Yeah. So now what happens? So now you have to train and work out behaviours and to recruit into people that can flex. Whereas I would probably argue that you always want flexible people.
Yes, and that's why I think. I mean, obviously you'd imagine this, but that's why I think you're really onto something here with the Maverick thing and having to call things out and having to change. A lot of the businesses that we work with, things they're asking for is how can I make my people more resilient? How can I make my people more flexible? Because people are being asked to do more and more jobs within the job role they're in, if that makes sense. So I think one of the key things that people are looking for is that ability to flex and be adaptable and to almost embrace change and to move forward when maybe the path ahead isn't clear. And I'm not sure that's always been the case, but that seems, in my opinion anyway, and from what I've seen, that's a key thing that people want in business now, isn't it? That flexibility.
Yeah. And that's quite fortunate for me because
I was going to say which way round did it come, but I think you're already ahead of the game rather than catching up. Yeah.
But what I would say is that as soon as you started talking, my first thought was why resilient.
Yeah.
Why flexible? Why? Because I don't think you can design a program until you know the reason. Because sometimes it's because they've got outdated systems that needs 5 times more people, or sometimes the reason everyone has to be resilient because there's one toxic manager that's making everybody cry, right. So it's like, why? So the first thing has to be a kind of just sense check with me. Why is it really important? And through asking that, you might find out it's not resilience we really need. It's more autonomy. It's more accountability. It's, so that's what's wrong with the system. And it's like, oh, okay. Oh, we can design something to solve that. So that's my brain again going, like, never taking the premise is like, yeah, you said it's resilient, but what is it really?
So, I mean, let's be real. There's people listening to this thinking, hold on. So what you're saying is we want people to come in and be disruptive, which is not what you're saying really. No. But bringing in new ways of thinking is probably a better way of thinking at it, or looking at things from a slightly different way. It is fair to say, though, that can sometimes ruffle feathers within teams. So what's your best advice to help those teams not just tolerate but actually embrace those sort of strategic mavericks? How do we stop those people, going back to what I said here, how do we stop those people from being seen as a pain in the backside to a massive asset? Because they clearly are, from what you're saying.
Because I would say it's not about the individual. So you could say, because there is a whole way of dealing with these socialised mavericks, or the strategic mavericks as you're calling it, to do stuff. But I would say a more healthy way of looking at it is, how do we make the maverick leadership principles work? So therefore everyone's a bit disruptive, everyone's a bit looking at stuff, and disruption can mean different things, right? So for one organisation, a disruption might be a more junior person is allowed to speak in a room of senior people. That might be hugely disruptive.
Yeah.
And for another organisation, it might be the ability to refuse to do something. So it might be like how you have intelligent disobedience in a hospital. So where you got the nurses have to follow the doctor's instructions. Okay. You might have a doctor who has worked 30 hours and they instruct the nurse to do something which the nurse knows is wrong, but they can't tell the doctor how might they do that. So then you might fall on some intelligent disobedient principles to make that happen. So I think what's different with Maverick, following the principles of Maverick leadership compared to other leadership styles, is you're not forgetting that human interaction. Because it's not a rigid system where, you've got a disillusioned learner, so I need to now do this. It's not like that. So
yes.
You're completely thinking of this person in front of you, or these people in front of you, and what's needed. So I talk a lot about alignment, and I do a lot of work around influence, because we can all manipulate, right? You just have a go at people or coerce them, and it will work.
Yeah, but when we walk away, what happens? Exactly.
Yeah. But if you really want people to change what they do and do it because they want to, then you need to influence, and you can't influence from a strong stance. It just doesn't work. So that you yourself becomes more versatile as an individual. You start looking at why people are doing things. You get more curious, right? So this person is doing this. Why is this person doing this? How does this work? What needs to do to change this individual? So you become a better leader because you not only become a more caring leader, you're looking at the entire system, not just moving parts.
And the answer to this may well be no, and that's absolutely fine. But one of the big ones for anybody sort of listening to this is sort of demonstrating the impact. So I'm loving the sort of theory, and I'm loving some of the ideas and the challenging, and there's a very, I'd say, as a creative and innovative thinker, it's really I'm really buying into this. Which is why I thought I'd have to have a chat. But when we put energy into developing and empowering Mavericks, how do we actually measure if that's working? What can you give me? I don't know, metrics or signs that we're looking for to prove that approach is actually paying off.
Okay, there are different metrics for Mavericks and Maverick leaders. So I'm going to stick with Maverick leaders because this is something that everyone can be. So metrics would be anyone is able to voice a concern that something isn't right.
Okay.
People can respond to that in a way that's humane and non-defensive. There's a learning approach, not a blame culture.
Yeah.
There's fun in the system, but there's seriousness too. And I think that more people run more simulations. I'm all about simulations, right? In the sense that you're going to make a change. So you're testing the system before you actually do it. So you're running it through. And then if it doesn't, the execution looks like it's not going to work, or it gets to a point that you can't recover from it failing, you run a simulation going, okay, let's just mentally change this and see what happens until you get to the point that you think it would work. Now, I'm not talking about making it perfect.
Yes, but it's workable at this point. Yeah, it's not
with
failing.
The consequence of it not working.
Yeah.
And that's a complete difference. And that's the sort of thing. So when people are going to do something, do they do that? If you're an organisation that has meetings back to back all the time forever, it's not an organisation that allows thinking. Time to pause, time to assess. It doesn't exist.
Cool. I'm not looking at the time as much as anything, but I've got a couple more for you, which I really want to pick your brains on. And you, obviously, being this Maverick, you are looking ahead, as we've already touched on. So I'm going to ask you to do that. So looking in your crystal ball, looking even further ahead now, Judith, how do you see the role of leadership changing in a world that increasingly demands this agility, this innovation, this unconventional thinking?
I kind of
how do leaders themselves need to embrace the Maverick paradox to stay relevant, I guess is what I'm asking. What comes next?
Because I've got two alternative tracks in my head running at the minute. One track is, at some point there'll be so much done by AI, there's not going to be many people left to lead. Is one track. And the other track is,
I really hope that's wrong, by the way.
But
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Klarna that sacked 700 employees and swapped them out with AI agents, and now they're trying to hire them back because it's gone horribly wrong. Yeah,
and wasn't there a similar? One of my daughters was saying that there's a lot of bad press around Duolingo at the moment for exactly the same thing, where they've said, it's all done by the AI now, and it's like, well, what about all those people? It almost feels like it's gone against their culture and what they do, and it's really interesting to see people moving away going, I don't agree with that, I don't like that, that. I didn't know that. So there's, I think we need to be a bit careful, but
but I think that's only timing. That's only just because they're not ready yet. I think that's still a potential future. I think if you want to stay ahead as a leader right now, I think you need to lift your head up, right, and stop working in a silo. You need, like, if you look in the book, I talk about capability and defining your knowledge and stuff like that, because you need to be more aware of the whole system. What is happening outside your field? What are the trends? What things move forward? You need to be continuously learning, and not just your expertise. You're supposed to know that anyway, but what affects your expertise? And I think the only way we can survive is to be more human than the AI. So it's to, I don't like the term soft skills, I prefer power skills, right? So we need to lean deeper into these power skills so that we understand empathy, we understand why people do things and how to align with them, as well as getting
which are all the things the AI can't do, right, at the moment.
Yeah, and becoming sharper on our execution, stuff like that. Because I think the problem, right, is that people are deploying AI to do the stuff that's simple and easy, right?
Yes.
But that means, which is in one respect really productive and efficient.
Well, only if they're using the people that were there for something else. But yes, the bits that AI can't do, yeah.
But the individual who has lost the easy part is now left with work that is constantly difficult. So the brain doesn't get to go, you know what, Friday afternoon's my admin day. Because maybe everything doesn't exist anymore. So now you're full on all the time. Now that burns you out really fast.
Yeah.
So what's the impact? So I can see like mental health and well-being going up. We've got AI reducing low entry skills and middle skills. So it's really weird. So it's the entry level. So we're going to have, what are we going to do with the young people? How are they going to learn how to do the basics if there's no one teaching them to do the basics because there's nobody there?
Because they don't need to. Yeah.
So how do they suddenly become experts on something? That's a ticking time bomb. And then I think the managers that we have, very large organisations are stripping out their management. If you look at like the tech places and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because they don't realise that a lot of what a manager does is the people-orientated stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say, as a leader, you need to be relevant. You need to be clear. So I do the thing about leadership identity. So how you can define what that means and how do you leverage that. That's going to be increasingly more important. Being a content driver is going to be more important. You know, I help people, so many people who are looking for jobs. And that's the biggest problem. They're losing out to people who have a great LinkedIn profile, who's written articles, who's gone on podcasts. We're not going to be able to go, I'm really highly skilled at my job, I'm safe. No, you're going to need to constantly adapt.
Wow, what a scary thought that is. And there's me, I was going to say sitting here, but standing here. There's me standing here with one daughter who's about to go to university and one who's got a year left at university. And do you know what? Their biggest concerns for both of them right now is, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's going to be around. I don't know where I don't know. I mean, they're both studying in things that they love, but it's like, but I don't know what I do next, Dad. I don't know where that goes. And I just don't have an answer because I don't know what those jobs look like either.
You know what I think? And this is probably will not age well, but I think
go for it. We'll clip it.
Like, we'll look at you 5 years ago, you so on. I'm thinking that what will happen is that we will be selling slivers of skill. Right. I think eventually we'll go away from looking for a HR manager, looking for a marketing person and go, we need someone who has the ability to produce this and someone who can do that. And I don't think there's a one job that I think people will just buy skills. Yeah. And I think we'll become that true portfolio worker.
That's really interesting.
Young person today, find something that they love that they can do as a side hustle, nurture that over time, so that you always have another revenue stream, another thing to do. Because if you think about the way jobs are going, they might end up doing a job that they might not really love or might not get the development they need. So they'll need to get that creative spark elsewhere. So even if that's selling stuff on Etsy or eBay or developing, doing videos for the old folks that can't do it, right? So, I think people need to be open now. And the thing with Generation Z, there are a ton of them. There are a lot of them. Yeah. And they need to stand out. So whilst they might think things like LinkedIn is a bit fuddy-duddy, they need to find something to stand out because they're a small speck in this huge group of individuals.
I think what you're saying makes good sense. I think dare I say, almost the days of my 26 years man and boy with one company, people just don't do that anymore. And in fact, in a lot of cases, from what you're saying, and I totally agree, people have 2 or 3 different jobs, and they're going to need that. They're going to have different skills in different places. And
3 or 4 jobs. They're talking about Generation Z having 7 careers. not
Right.
even jobs, careers. That's like a huge amount of relearning. And I think you mentioned earlier about psychological safety.
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting because way back when I was young, when I studied for the HR stuff, we talked about the psychological contract. So this was the contract that the organisation gave to the employees. Like, we will develop you, pay you, X, Y, Z, and you will do this. Somehow the psychological contract has disappeared and it's become psychological safety, but it's been pushed onto the employee. How are you going to be psychologically safe? It's like, hang on a second, an organisation owes it to the individual to keep them safe. So, but it's kind of been switched between, because I remember when I was studying, it's like, how can I design an organisation that will uphold the psychological contract to the employees, whatever happens? Even if we sack them, how do we keep this contract in intent? But that seems to have gone, and now it's down onto the employees. It's like, how can you ensure that you feel psychologically safe? Maybe you need to go on the wellbeing course. It's like, no, we owe it to them to make it safe. Do you know what I mean? It's like
push it, totally push it on someone else. Love that. Judith, time is against us, but I have to ask the final question I ask every one of my guests. So, and apologies, well, you definitely haven't prepped yourself for this one. What's your ultimate weekend look like? What's your ultimate weekend look like? You can do anything you like. What's the ultimate weekend for Judith? You're not allowed to be writing a book, by the way.
That's good. You only say that because you know I am writing a book.
That's exactly why I'm saying that.
You know what? This is going to be really sad. I just want to be out in nature with family and friends, and it's almost harking. This is so sad and pathetic now, but it's kind of like harking back to the days when you were younger and you used to kick a ball, on the field, and you just had a picnic, and it was just life was just easy, and it was just nice and slow. I guess.
Why is that sad? That is not sad at all. There's not a mention of AI involved there. There's not a mention of your phone. There's not a mention. It's like, can we just actually can we literally just be outside and be human again? No, what a great way to finish. Judith, thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to stop there, and I'll catch you on the other side. See you in a second.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Feeling curious to learn more about how we help people remember stuff? Well, why not sign up for a free trial of our AI-powered bite-sized learning app, BentoBot? You can do that easily at bentobot.com. And you can catch up on interviews with all of our previous guests by subscribing to this pod via Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform. Till next time, take care.